right, Gray Mains, we've talked about the future. Now let's honor the past. Every episode we induct a Detroit Lion into the Hall of the Underrated. Players who've delivered excellence but never have gotten the flowers they deserved. Tonight's inductee is a name that should be spoken in the same breath as the greats, but somehow gets lost in the shuffle of Lions history. The one and the only Brett Perriman. From 1991 to 1996, Brett Perriman was one of the most productive wide receivers in the NFL, not just Detroit, but in the entire league. Let me give you the data, because this is the Gray Mains, and we bring receipts here, ladies and gentlemen. 1995, the season that should have made him a household name, 108 receptions. Let's let that sink in. 1,488 receiving yards, 9 touchdowns. That's 108 catches in 1995, a 16-game season. He and Herman Moore were the first Lions in franchise history to record 100 receptions in a single season. But here's the kicker. He never made a Pro Bowl. Not once. Shedeur Sanders made a Pro Bowl this year. But not even in 1995, when he and Herman Moore became the most productive receiving duo in NFL history, a record that still stands today despite the league adding a 17th game. Moore and Perriman combined for 231 receptions and 2,700 yards in 1995. That's not just a Lions record, it's an NFL record for a receiving duo in a single season. And it's held for over 30 years. Brett played in the shadow of Barry Sanders, the greatest Lion of all time, during one of the most dysfunctional eras in the franchise history. He played through coaching chaos, front office instability, and playoff heartbreak, and despite all of that, he produced an elite level year after year. And yet, because the Lions didn't win, because Barry took up all the oxygen in the room, because the national media ignored Detroit like they always do, Brett Perriman, his name faded. But not here. Not on the Lions Gray Mains. Tonight, we induct Brett Perriman into the Lions Gray Mains Hall of the Underrated, a receiver who rewrote the franchise record book, set an NFL record with Herman Moore, and never got the recognition he deserved. Dan, Brent, let's talk about why Brett Perriman is a lock for this honor. Gentlemen, let's start here. DBC. Herman Moore just reminded us on social media. I don't know if you saw this post he put on X. He and Brett Perriman still hold the NFL record for the most combined receiving yards and receptions by a duo in a single season. That's a 16-game season, while today's players have 17 games to work with. Put that record into context for us. How dominant was that offense, and why does that record still stand?
Well, the thing that stood out to me about Brett Perriman, when we talked about Noah Gray and inducted him into the Hall of the Underrated a few weeks ago, was his size. 5'9" receiver, fearless, would run across the middle. He was prolific, what we'll call a great teammate. He was much like Benny Blades on the defensive side of the ball. He was the cheerleader, the fire-up guy on the offense. Coming from South Florida, he had good speed and distinguished himself by being the Robin to the Batman. He had no problem with Herman Moore being the number one guy. He just wanted to have his catches. Every receiver goes back to the huddle and says, I was wide open. And he had a couple great quarterbacks throwing to him. I love the way that Eric Kramer threw the football. Eric Kramer's passes were so catchable. Not that he had a weak arm, but there's quarterbacks that throw the ball and it hurts your hands and you're more inclined to drop them. But Kramer just threw this very catchable football. Scott Mitchell could really fit the ball into tight places and threw a good football. He had the luxury of having Barry Sanders in the backfield, Johnny Morton, and Herman Moore. That really opened the field up for him. Catch that he had against the Bucks, where he bobbled the ball coming past the secondary, is one of my favorite plays to watch over and over again. And the highlights that he had against the Bears, against the Packers, he was just a big game player. He showed up. and he caught contested footballs as well as anybody 5'9". He had pretty good vertical, and the combination of having those quarterbacks and the complementary players that he had around him, I think he was in a perfect position. Because if you look at the rest of his career, it was very nondescript. It was just normal second receiver kind of statistics, 56 receptions, 49, 52. And look, those are good statistics. But those 2 seasons, and you referencing the all-time leaders in a single season in terms of receptions, those are the things that really jump out about Brett Perriman. And I know Dan's got some great color to add here with Brett's career and some little-known facts.
I'm going to throw out some names that are probably going to make you guys cringe. Chris stole my thunder on the record, so we can't go down that path. He was with the Lions for 6 years. The first 4 years, there was some instability. The last 6 years, Wayne Fontes was the head coach, right? He went 12-4 in 91, 5-11, 10-6, 9-7, 10-6, then 5-11. Everybody got fired, right? But you look at this, you mentioned his quarterbacks. The first 3 years he's in the league, he's playing with Kramer and Pete, and then Ware. You got that 3-headed show of a quarterback that we had going on. Yeah. Kramer played well, but when you have more than one quarterback, you have no quarterbacks. That's the rule. We didn't have a quarterback. None of them separated themselves. But yet, during that time frame, in 91, Barry was getting the ball at 12-4. 91 was probably the greatest year prior to 2 years ago that the Lions have had in the last 30 years. We opened by getting just dusted by the Skins, and then we closed the season in the playoffs and the championship game by getting dusted by the Skins. But in between, Barry Sanders played great. And the funny thing is, along the way, Brett Perriman was our number 1 wide receiver. Yeah. Guy only had 668 yards that year. Our receiving core was Robert Clark, Willie Green, Mike Barr, and a little-known rookie who barely got any catches, and then by this guy named Herman Moore.
Yeah.
How in the hell do you not use Herman Moore as a rookie? Oh, I know why. Because Dave Levy was the offensive coordinator. Him and Dan Henning, over the first 4 years of Brett's career, they killed this offense. And guess what unlocked him? The guy, the man, the guru who just retired at 92 or something like that. Tom Moore came on board in 1995. Legend. These are the numbers. You mentioned 95. Moore, Perriman, both over 100 catches. Moore had 1,686 yards that year. Perriman, 1,488. In 96, even though we went 5-11, Moore was 1,296 and Perriman was 1,021. Those are the only 2 years of his career where he had 1,000 yards receiving.
And Barry still had 1,000-something yards.
He did. He had 1,000 yards rushing. Although he might have gotten injured in 96. That was the year when he hurt his knee, I think. Or potentially.
But he still had 1,000 yards every year.
Yeah, he had 1,500 yards in 1995 because the passing game became much more prevalent. Mitchell, for as much as many people panned Mitchell, he played very well that year. We were 10-6, made the playoffs. That offense was something special those few years with Moore running. He knew how to get the most out of every single one of those guys.
Tom Moore, the players used to talk about how messy he was. They went into his office and it was just mounds and mounds of paper where he was like a mad scientist. He would draw up plays, paper everywhere, just the way that they did it back in those days.
Oh yeah, I know a guy that absolutely adored him too, and he won a Super Bowl with him, and his name was Peyton. So
Peyton Manning.
Yeah, he was over in Indy. He left the Lions, went to India at one point. I think he ended his career in Tampa this last year, was a consultant. But one of the greatest minds ever. We're here talking about Brett. Brett, he was unlocked. Tom knew how to unlock Perriman. Perriman was really good before.
Yes.
And Tom Moore made him great. He said, okay, Herman's the lead guy at 6'4". He's not a blazer. He's 6'4", runs probably a 4.6, but he's the best contested catcher until Randy Moss showed up, and then Calvin Johnson. But Brett, he utilized him on those under routes, those shallow crossers. He knew how to get him in space and get the ball in his hand and let him do damage. And Mitchell was good at delivering the ball, a catchable ball. Kramer was, you're right, Kramer had a great ball.
Eric Kramer,
he didn't have much of an arm.
He's got some records.
He played his best ball with the Bears after he left us. And
that Dallas game was beautiful.
Yeah,
could chuck it.
He could. And Ronnie Pete wasn't that bad either. He just couldn't stay healthy. For a 6th-round pick, he was the Heisman Trophy backup the year he was at USC, but then he just couldn't stay healthy.
So let me ask you this, Brent. If Brett Perriman played in today's NFL, maybe in Ben Johnson's offense, maybe in Drew Petzing's offense, Dan Campbell's offense, with Jared Goff throwing him the ball, what kind of player do you think he would be? Does his skill set translate to the modern game? What do you think?
I think if he were to play into today's day and age, he'd be a lot like Amon-Ra St. Brown. Amon-Ra is a guy that will run those crossing routes. He's able to have enough speed to be able to create separation. The best comp that I could come up with, he's probably a little bit faster. He did run good routes. And the Lions offense, in many ways, felt like it was a pickup game, just slinging the ball. Scott Mitchell had his best season that year in '95. It was a lot of fun to watch. So he would need to be under more discipline and structure. And I think when playing for the Lions today, he'd be a lot like Amon-Ra St. Brown. He would have consistent 100 reception years like Amon-Ra does.
I would disagree slightly because the one thing that Perriman lacks that St. Brown has is not only the frame, but also the fortitude to block. When he was on the
Blocking is a
field,
big part.
he didn't have to block for Barry. Barry made the blocks for him. And he was good at getting in the way, but he was pretty slight. He was only 175 pounds.
Yeah.
I don't know how his kid ended up being like 6'4", like 220.
Oh, yeah, we didn't even
215,
talk about
but
it. His son, Rashad Perriman. I'm
He
not
was
sure
line
if he's
briefly, wasn't he?
currently employed by an NFL team. As of last year, I think he was with Tampa or Baltimore.
I just don't think Brett would. I know he would try. That was just his mentality. He would give it a go. I just think physically, size-wise, at 5'9", 175, whatever it is, he's definitely. I wouldn't compare him to St. Brown. I'd compare him actually to Khalif Raymond. That's who he is. And I think that in the right offense where they're not asking them to do blocking, I think he would definitely excel if he was the slot guy as a third wide receiver. It's a different game now than it was then.
Sure.
So it's much more wide receiver driven, but the wide receivers have to be well-rounded. They don't see the field.
I think the thing about Brett, Dan, is if you watch the Barry Sanders highlight runs, when Barry cuts back, you'll see Brett blocking. And sometimes there's a couple times where he had his hands up in the air. He's just running interference like you were describing.
That's exactly.
But yeah, he was a good blocker. We're talking about two eras. And the receivers back in those days, the emphasis was not like it is today on blocking. Brett would just go across the middle. There's so few receivers that have the courage to just run those crossing routes. And Amon-Ra, those skinny posts and those crossing routes, the ins, outs. Yeah, I'll stand by my comp. He is definitely smaller.
You know the difference is the wide receivers back then, they weren't put into the weight room and done the training that the guys do nowadays. They're getting it from the high school level all the way through college into the NFL. So not only are they on, back then it was about the jugs, it was about the route running, crispness, things like that. Just enough strength to not get knocked off your route. Nowadays, you look at these guys, some of these guys, look at DK Metcalf. The dude's like a freaking bodybuilder. He's a big kid, and he's just all muscle. And you're seeing more and more of that with the wide receivers.
AJ Brown.
Even the little guys. Yeah. Even the little guys, they realize that this may be one of the reasons why the injuries have increased in the NFL too. They are bigger, they're faster, they're stronger at every position. And you have to offset that to be able to stay on the field. Otherwise, you're just going to get broken in half.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for indulging us in Lions Gray Mane's Hall of the Underrated. Brett Perriman, half of the most productive receiving duo in NFL history, but 0 Pro Bowls, 0 national recognition, but pure Hall of the Underrated. Herman Moore said it best, legacy doesn't compete with the present, it completes it. And Brett Perriman's legacy is a part of what makes today's Lions offense so special. Amon-Ra and Jamison Williams are chasing the standard that Brett and Herman set 30 years ago. That's the power of honoring the past. It gives today's players something to chase. It gives fans something deeper to belong to. And it gives the franchise the weight it deserves. Brett Perriman, welcome to the Lions Gray Mane's Hall of the Underrated. You earned it. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in to Lions Gray Mane's tonight. And as always, we like to say, go Lions.